welcome. In this video, we're going to explore Bard and the story of the Legion of Dawn. And in that, we will see the challenges of valor, might, and resolve. So let's continue on with Renee's story, the third pilot, as she talks to Bard and they discuss about the Legion of Dawn and the history of them. Let's listen in.
So, you're the one after all. I thought it might be you. The Grandmaster talked to you?
I talked to him, yeah. What's this about?
You've been making waves. Opening the gates of the Fortress of Dawn? Not bad. But reaching the inner sanctum? All kinds of wheels started turning in Antium when you did that.
What do you mean? Why would anybody in Antium care about me?
I mean that wheels literally started turning inside the palace. Ardenvasa built some device to tell him if a worthy lancer appeared. I hear it told half the city.
Great. Now I get to worry about disappointing the Emperor.
I told you he'd be watching. Now it's just a question of what you do next.
I get the feeling that's where you come in.
Well, that depends on you. I guess it's time to properly introduce myself. I'm the lawkeeper and storyteller for the Legion of Dawn.
The Legion is gone. It broke apart centuries ago.
The Lancers left the path, it's true. But there have always been a few souls tasked with keeping the Legion alive. Ardenvasa left the wheels ready to turn for a reason. The path of the Legionnaire has been waiting, like the doors at the Fortress of Dawn, for a worthy Lancer.
I passed all the tests. I was welcomed into the Legion of Dawn already. Sort of.
The trials proved you're worthy to become a Legionnaire, but you're not one yet. You know the stories of General Tarsus. Do you know the tales of her most trusted council?
I've heard their names, children's stories. But I don't think that's what you're asking.
You should know whose footsteps you're following. At the height of the dawn, countless lancers flocked to the banner of General Tarsus. All who had the heart to fight were given a place, but a few were more than just lancers. These were the boon companions of Tarsus, walking the path as she did, the Legionnaires.
I know you're not asking me to become best friends with the late General.
In a way, I am. Ardenvasa, builder of the first javelin, the first emperor. Sanadin, whose swiftness inspired Corvus. Medero, Magnastral, and Leotrail the Unbroken. They all had one thing in common. They shared the ideals of Helena Tarsus.
And you want me to do that too?
Follow in their footsteps. Become a Legionnaire. So many eyes are watching you. If you can do this, revive the path of the Legionnaire, maybe the glory days of the Legion are only beginning.
Tarsus built a mighty fortress in the center of a wide valley, designed to find the eye of enemy and ally alike. Urgoth were drawn from far and wide to throw themselves at its gates, thus keeping them from hunting the hiding Arcanus. But humans made the journey to the fortress as well, aspiring hope to join the ranks of the Legion of Dawn, those brave souls who proceed the Urgoth-haunted valley to the gates on the right to be tested on the path of the Legionnaires. Those could walk the path, even for a moment, were given javelins and a place in the ranks. But to those who mastered the path, all secrets were revealed, and they were made a part of the general's circle. When Helena Tarsus fell, Ardenvasa sealed the gates to the fortress and led the Legionnaires to defend Antium forever. But upon the fortress gates he left his solemn oath that should one day a worthy soul appear, the trials and the paths should open for them, that they might yet take their place at the side of the general.
Medero was the son of Arcanists. He had lived his entire life in a cavern, underground, hiding. At 10 years old, he had never seen the sky or an Urgoth or any beast but men. The world was utterly unknown to him, except for tales of horror and woe. But among the stories warning children to hide and obey their parents, Medeiron heard one other, a whispered tale of a rebellion against the Urgoth, and a legion rising to set all people free. So, at just 10 years old, Medeiron left the safety of the Arcanists to find the Legion of Dawn.
A small child with no knowledge of the world goes out by himself. That's a recipe for disaster.
You know that, and I know that. Medeiron didn't know that. Raised to be a scholar, he knew how to read the secret signs of the Arcanists. He followed them through the wilds to the Legion of Dawn. Or he tried to, anyway. The Chimera had a different plan.
Is this the kind of story where a small boy fights a chimera with a stick and a rock?
No. Although most of those stories you've heard are based on Medeiron. He'd never seen a chimera. He'd never even seen a grabbit, but he was a very good student. He learned all the warning signs that he was being hunted, and remembered stories about laying false trails. He led the chimera on a long and winding path through the rocks, back and forth. He could never shake the creature, but it could never find him. Then, the other hunters came. General Tarsis, in the first javelin ever made. Testing her new armor, she found the chimera stalking the boy.
Lucky for Medeiron.
No luck about it. Tarsis followed his trail, just as the chimera did. She was just learning the javelin. No one knew what it could do, not even the man who made it. Not trusting her suit's strength in a fight with the chimera, she lured it into chasing her instead. While it ran after Tarsis, Leotrel found the boy and spirited him away to safety.
After all that, he just went home again? It's not much of a story.
I said safety, not home. They took him to their own camp, where the Legion hid at the time. When Tarsis asked where he lived and who his people were, Medeiron replied, "You are my people." The others tried to persuade him to return home, but after a long moment, Tarsis said, "He is home." From then on, Medeiron served as a page to the Legion of Dawn. Eventually, he became a legionnaire himself. But that's another story.
Now it's time for the Challenge of Valor. You must do stuff for free play, strongholds, and contracts. In doing so, you will complete that challenge.
You've walked the path of valor. By now, I suppose that's not really a surprise. It's time to tell you how the freelancers began. Medeiron was raised by the Legion of Dawn. He witnessed Tarsis testing the first javelin. He was at the general's side when the fortress was built, earned his own javelin, and fought beside her, even at the Battle of Antium Pass. Of the company that stood with Tarsis and held back the Urgoth, only Medeiron survived.
Who else was there? The tales always make it sound like Tarsis fought alone.
You already know the others. Evenia, Atinia, Ganes, and Kerith. The Guardians, legends call them. I heard you found all their tombs.
I did, but nobody told me they all died at Antium Pass.
In grief, the Legion tore itself in two. Half went with Magnastral, half with Arden Vasa, and one legionnaire who went with no one. Medeiron stayed at the Fortress of Dawn, even though the gates were sealed and the Lancers gone for good.
You said the story was about freelancers. None of us were at the Fortress of Dawn.
Of course not. It was locked up tight. Alone in the courtyard, Medeiron heard a distant roar.
Okay, that's better.
It was a sound he remembered, for it haunted his dreams. The roar of the chimera Cindermore, the monster that stalked him long ago.
The same one. Who was still alive?
It vanished for more than a decade, but with the general's death, it returned.
This time, he faces it down and wins.
Not exactly. Alone, he stood no chance. But the city of Anshar lay helpless in its path. He had no choice. He found the chimera's trail and followed it, not to the monster, but to its lair. For he knew that if he silenced the relic that created it, Cindermore would lose its power.
That's all great if the ruin was empty.
That was the problem, yes. Medeiron found the relic, though the monster was right beside it. But he had plenty of experience in laying false trails. Medeiron woke the chimera, and it chased his false tracks while he slipped past and silenced the relic. Cindermore fell, and the Lancer finally defeated the beast that stalked him long ago. In that moment, Medeiros knew his calling, to walk the path of valor, even if he walked it alone. Of all the Legionnaires, Magna Strahl was the most renowned for her feats of strength. But it wasn't always so.
The founder of the Dominion's not my favorite person right now. You know that, right?
Just listen. She came to the Legion of Dawn as a young girl. Her village was raided and everyone taken. Almost. She was so small she hid inside a basket. The Urgoth surely caught her scent, but they thought her too weak to bother taking.
They don't tell this story much in the Dominion, do they?
As I understand it, the Dominion banned stories of Magna Strahl's early life. Alone, unarmed, she followed the secret Arcanist signs to Sanctuary, where the rebels hid and plotted. There, Strahl begged Tarsis to let her join the Legion, to grant her vengeance. But the general refused. She said Magna wasn't ready, and sent her away. Strahl couldn't accept that. So she went out alone to fight the Urgoth.
Without a javelin? That's insane.
She set traps, ambushes. She poisoned spears and knives. Any small advantage she could take against a vastly superior enemy, she gladly took. She nearly died dozens of times, but vengeance drove her onward. And the Urgoth fell. She carried trophies to the Sanctuary, day after day, week after week.
Poison and stealth do not sound all that mighty.
Remember that for General Tarsis, the trial of might involved luring enemies into a trap. Might isn't just simple feats of strength. It's achieving your goal with whatever means available. Finally, General Tarsis spoke with her. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want to join the Legion of Dawn," Magna replied. Tarsis looked at her and asked, "Why? You already have your revenge." The general looked to the many, many Urgoth trophies Strahl fought for. At first, Strahl had no answer. Then, after a long moment, she said, "It's where I belong." To which Tarsis answered, "Then you're finally ready to join us."
So what happened? How did Strahl end up leaving the Legion and founding the Dominion?
That's a story for another time.
And now it's time for the Trials of Might, which you must defeat Dominion, the Scar, and the Outlaws factions. Doing so, you will finish the Trials of Might.
So, now that you've walked in her footsteps, let me tell you the final tale of Magna Strahl. When General Tarsis fell, those closest to her went into mourning. Each carried grief in their own way. For Magna, the loss of her friend and leader turned to rage. She couldn't rest while a single Urgoth lived. They were already broken by the sword of Fulminus, terrified, fleeing to the dark corners of the world. But hard on their heels, Strahl came, hunting them one by one.
This sounds like the other story you told me.
Listen to enough tales of Magna Strahl and a pattern emerges. When at last her scouts found no more enemies, she returned to the Fortress of Dawn. There she found the doors sealed. The Legionnaires were preparing to leave it forever.
So who did she kill this time?
Right then? Nobody. While Strahl eased her grief with battle, Arden Vasa fixated on his duty. With her final breath, Tarsis had made him swear Antium would not fall, no matter the cost. At her command, Vasa prepared to take the entire Legion of Dawn to safeguard Antium for all time. Outraged at what she saw as desertion, Strahl ordered the Lancers to halt, and they obeyed. Her general secured a future for all people, not just Antium. She called for the Legion to follow her, to battle the enemy in the darkness where they'd fled.
So which one had the right idea?
Well, if you ask a Sentinel, Arden Vasa. Ask a Paladin, it's Strahl. A freelancer usually says neither. Strahl was admired, some might say revered, by many, and they gladly joined her cause. Vasa called them traitors. Strahl declared those who stayed behind were cowards, and the Legion broke. Those who followed Magna Strahl called themselves Paladins and went north to pursue the enemies of man. They vanished into the darkness and were never heard from again.
I wish they had disappeared forever, but we aren't that lucky.
For a long time, we believed all the Paladins died in the far north. When we learned they'd survived the cataclysm that froze Strahlheim, centuries had passed, and they were Different from what they once were. Whatever happened to the Paladins can't be allowed to overcome the Freelancers or the Sentinels.
We can't defend against something we can't even identify.
Be on your guard, Lancer. Walk the paths. Before the Battle of Antium Pass, the Legion's test of resolve had a different basis. It began with Leotrel, the General's oldest friend. When Tarsis first raised an army against the Urgoth, Leotrel was with her. The Arcanists were hidden from them. They hadn't yet found Arden Vasa. No lancers, no javelins, no weapons, no fortress. Not even a good hiding place. Nothing but the vision of Helena Tarsis and Leotrel's unbreakable will.
You can stop building suspense. I already know they formed the Legion.
This story isn't about whether they succeeded, it's about how. A legion needs soldiers, and it began with just one. The two set out to find the Urgoth. The plan was simple. Follow the raiders and warn villages in their path. At first, they succeeded in getting word of the coming Urgoth to people in time. Villagers fled, but the longer the Urgoth went without a catch, the faster it spurred their hunt. Finally, Tarsis and Leotrel arrived at a town with the Urgoth on their heels. Flight was impossible, so they stood and fought.
2 against all the Urgoth? Without javelins? That's suicide.
Tarsis hoped to slow the Urgoth enough that some villagers could escape. The two of them, alone, armed with simple weapons, were little more than an annoyance to the enemy. But they fought. Despite greater numbers, strength, and weapons, the Urgoth could not subdue them. Finally, with Tarsis wounded and Leotrel at the point of exhaustion, the two prepared for the end. But the villagers rallied. With tools and improvised weapons, they joined the battle and routed the enemy. Many innocents were taken that night, but not all of them. Because people fought the inevitable. And the rest is a tale for another time.
Now you must complete the Trials of Resolve, and in order to complete, you must do a set number of daily and weekly challenges.
You've walked the path of resolve. It's a hard one to travel.
You're not going to tell me about the last stand of General Tarsis now, are you? Because I've heard that story many times before.
No. This is the story of how the Legion endured its own destruction. While Vasa and Strahl fought about which way to take their lancers, Leotrel prepared. She prepared her oldest friend for burial. She prepared places for all the fallen, and she prepared the way for those still to come. She took Garrett's volumes of the Legion from the Fortress of Dawn before it was sealed. She left Helena's signet in the General's tomb, waiting for the right hand to reclaim it.
The Hand of Tarsis, you mean? Faye said the Legion believed she'd come back one day.
They did believe that. Leotrel most of all. She would not abandon her friend or her path, even though the battle was over. The world would always need Tarsis, and Tarsis would always need legionnaires. She followed Arden Vasa to Antium for a time, and left the records with trusted lancers, to be maintained and passed down, generation after generation.
To you. This is your story.
Our story. The Legion lives on through us.
What happened to Leotrel?
Oh, once her preparations were complete, her plans in motion, she left Antium and vanished. Like the beginning. The end of her story is a mystery. But it's not beginnings or endings that matter. It's the path you follow between them. So, you've walked all the paths. What do you think?
What was all this for? Why have I been trying to recreate the deeds of Legionnaires?
The Legion of Dawn wasn't one person or one deed. It wasn't even the trials of General Tarsis. It was 1,000 people. 1,000 deeds, great and small, that brought us to this moment. Stories have beginnings and endings, a clear path, an arc. But we know that reality isn't like stories. We only have the path ahead. Nothing is clear, and nothing truly ends. Listen, Legionnaire. This is your tale now. It has been for some time. Learn from the mistakes of our forebears. Persist, even in the face of the inevitable. Walk the path, even if you have to do it alone. Welcome to the Legion of Dawn. There are other stories, other Legionnaires you could learn from, but that's for another time.